Welcome to the Bayou Progressive. I'm Quentin Anthony Anderson, and today I'm joined by the Reverend Larry Foy, Democratic candidate for Congress in Louisiana's 5th Congressional District. Foy is an ordained minister, an educator, a policy advocate, and a community organizer whose campaign is rooted in healthcare access, voting rights, economic justice, education, and criminal justice reform. As Democrats head into one of Louisiana's first major federal election cycles under the new closed primary system, Foy is making his case to Democratic voters in a district that should be surprisingly competitive come November, if we put in the necessary work. Reverend Foy, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Quentin, for having me.
Oh, of course. So, first and foremost, tell me a little bit about your background. I just got to see you at a forum in Livingston Parish where you kind of mentioned that you've kind of been all over the place in terms of geographically. So, tell me a little bit about your background and what your Louisiana story is.
Yeah. I was born and raised in Louisiana, actually, born in Monroe, but raised in Winsboro. Born in Monroe simply because at the time I was born, there were no hospitals. The closest hospital was in Monroe, and where most of the surrounding parishes, most people had to go to Monroe to be born. I was
Mm-hmm.
born in E.A. Conway, at that time, Charity Hospital. And so that was just simply the time frame in which I was born. But raised in Winsboro, I call Winsboro home, uh, and resided there until I was graduated from high school. Left high school just like many others did, in search of opportunity. And I left Louisiana, moved to the Chicago area, and lived in the Chicago area for a number of years, a little over a decade.
What
And
part of Chicago?
I was in the western suburbs in a town called Wheaton and Lombard, Illinois.
Okay.
Uh, Wheaton is a famous little town where uh, the Billy Graham Center is located, the famous
Okay.
evangelist Billy Graham Center. In fact, I lived in the house, the very house where the Billy Graham Center is sitting at now. I used to live in a home that was there, of course. The Billy Graham Center sits there now. So,
Okay.
yeah, I lived there and received my higher education, most of my higher education there in the area, graduating from North Central College, which is a small private Methodist college, um, and with a bachelor's degree in religion and philosophy, and then went on there to seminary, the Northern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is an American Baptist related seminary, earning a master's degree in theology and ethics there. Uh, Left Chicago, and then moved to Los Angeles, where actually all of my on my mother's side, my maternal grandparents had lived, and where a lot of Louisianans had migrated, to back in the 1950s in the early Black migration, where most Louisianans, Black Louisianans, and Texans moved west in search of opportunity and to get away from discrimination. They moved to California, and most people who lived in Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas moved north to cities like Chicago and
Right.
Detroit. So I wound up in Los Angeles where my maternal grandparents had lived. All of my maternal uncles and aunts had lived, and there in Los Angeles, I attended USC in the doctoral program in the Graduate School of Religion, and studied ethics and public policy formation. Um, and Upon graduating, I actually went to teach and went back to Chicago. I actually commuted back and forth to Chicago, teaching theology and ethics and world religion courses at the undergraduate level, and did some seminary teaching as well to local pastors and seminarians. And so, uh, uh, in Los Angeles, I eventually became involved in community organizing and community work. They say this, first of all, the first employment opportunity I had in Los Angeles was actually directing a homeless shelter. In fact, the largest homeless shelter in the world at the time, the Union Rescue Mission.
Hmm.
And that's the first time I had ever seen or experienced homelessness because I didn't see it in Louisiana. I saw a lot of poverty, but never homelessness.
Well,
And from
that's one
there,
heck of an education. Skid Row,
yeah,
and yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right. Oh, yeah, exactly. And work with the homeless shelter, and then uh, um, and after going working on my PhD at USC, as I said, I got into teaching, taught back in Illinois for 5 years. Came back to California and taught 2 years at Westmont College, was a private, mostly conservative college in Santa Barbara, California. Uh, Actually called Montecito, the area where Oprah and all of those people live at, one of those rich,
Hmm.
affluent areas. And I left teaching because I had an experience that actually shocked me. This was a private conservative Christian college. And I remember sitting one day in a faculty meeting, and we were to be having a cultural diversity training. In fact, I was only African American faculty there at the institution, and there was one other African American who had a significant position at the school, and he was the person who was leading the cultural diversity training. And in the midst of that training, he was talking about the need for the school to become more diverse. The school was obviously 99% white, and the other 1% was perhaps comprised of African Americans and Latino Hispanic students. But in the midst of his presentation, the chair of my department, the acting chair of my department, stood up and said, "Well, I don't know. Uh, I'm concerned about our school becoming too diverse, uh, and I'm afraid that we may lose our Christian distinction of
Oh
being a
wow.
Christian college." And then she went on to say, and the fact that it was a woman, went on to say, uh, let me give you an example. For example, if we start allowing any and everybody to come into our institution, for example, Native Americans, and we know that all Native Americans are pagans, they worship pagan religion. And so we allow Native Americans to come in with their pagan religion, then who else is to come? And I was floored just upon hearing that. Here is a Princeton educated person with a PhD in theology uh, making that kind of statement. And that
Yeah.
statement shocked me to the core. And I said to myself, this is not the place for me. So I left that college and then came back to Los Angeles and then got involved in justice work, where I've had my roots at for the last 25 years, working with Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Los Angeles, then working with another organization that catered to formerly incarcerated women, and then working with my last organization I work with, the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, that basically promoted racial justice, but with the focus on decarceration or ending mass incarceration. And so here I am today, back in Louisiana, which never really left, if you
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
say that, because like I said, you can take the country out of the boy, but you can't take the boy out of the country. So my heart has always been in Louisiana. I was uh, uh, here every year, 2 or 3 times out of a year. My parents were here, my siblings were here, and then I had a brother who recently who succumbed in Angola prison just last year. Who
Mm.
actually spent 40 years in Angola. So
Wow.
I have a vested interest in this state, a vested interest in the welfare of the people of this state, a vested interest in justice.
Well, I guess that's a very natural segue then. You've spent so much of your life in ministry and doing theological work, um, and the advocacy that you've done that you mentioned. Why is now the time to run for office?
Because That's the evolution of my life.
Hmm.
In fact, I've always been interested in politics, going all the way back from 8, 9 years old. Uh, and my fondest memories are seeing my father in a whole different light whenever he went to vote. The Voting Rights Act passed 1965.
Hmm.
And up to that time, my father could not vote, or my parents could not vote, without some poll tax or some literacy test, you know. But seeing my father in those early years of my childhood coming home with a smile on his face and his head held up high, the fact that he was able to vote
Yeah.
uh, began to shape my political consciousness. And it was not until actually I had graduated from high school and then got into college, then I really discovered the importance and value of the vote. Uh, and I have never missed an election, voting in a national election, federal election, or local election since I was 18 years old. Then, too, my political conscience was shaped. Uh, uh, by in one sense, by the black religious tradition. Black
Hmm.
prophetic tradition was always stood in the forefront of the civil rights movement. Always advocated for voting rights. Uh, so I've followed politics from my childhood and always participated in the voting process and had actually supported a number of campaigns and worked as a religious coordinator and get out the vote for a number of people who aspired who had aspirations for political office. But it's something that has evolved in my bones. That's just been there. And so now is the right time because the question for me is where can I be most impactful at now with the knowledge, the experience that I've gained over the years. And now is the right time for me to be pursuing this particular office, which I had every intent to do so back in 2024 when I initially walked away from my last place of public service. I had initially in 2024 resigned to pursue the fifth district in 2024, but as you well know, uh, with the courts and the gerrymandering issue and all of that. Um, and then when they withdrew the new district was actually in the sixth district. I had hoped that it would be in the fifth. My bet was that it was going to be on the fifth. Of course, it turned out to be the sixth. And so I'm running for the fifth district because this is where my heart is. This is where my folk are, and this is where the fifth district need a leader who's going to go to Washington and who are going to serve their best interests.
I think, and this is a slight aside, but I appreciate your willingness to run in the district that you actually live in, because I do believe that there is a candidate running in your district who doesn't live anywhere in the district. Like
Right,
it's just not a part of the district at all. But he's the front runner on the other side, and I think that
right, I understand.
that's a
Yes.
little. So you know what? As a segue from that, why is it important to, even though the law allows you to live anywhere and still represent any congressional district, why is it important to actually be a constituent of the district that you're representing?
Well, I think it's important because uh, you know something about the district. You're accessible.
Hmm.
You know the needs and concerns of the people who live in the district, uh, and you give a sense of pride to people in the district when they know they have someone uh, who lives among them, whom they have access to, and who they feel that's going to really represent their best interests.
Hmm.
So just being in the district, I think, uh, gives that gives that sense of being a real presence for them.
I've always thought that it's also a little unfair when you're casting votes that you won't have to suffer the consequences of,
Right.
right? Like you're casting votes on behalf of people that have to live with the consequences of your decision, and you don't have to. You actually have another
Right.
congressperson that you have to petition. So I've always thought that that's kind of an interesting setup because it happens here locally, where people
Yeah.
don't necessarily live in the lines, or they'll use the homestead exemption. And I've always thought that kind of undermines the spirit of representation, because you should want to be represented by the same person that has to go through the same four-way crosswalk where the red light keeps on breaking all the time. You
Right.
should want somebody that has shared experience. But I want to go back to the fact that you're trying to wear two different hats now. So you're going to wear your ministerial hat, but if elected, you'd also be an elected politician. And I'm wondering how do you balance that, being a religious, a spiritual leader, but also the practicality that comes with modern politics, and
Mhm.
often that you're not facing a choice between the perfect and the worst. It's usually
Right.
whatever you get, like life, right? And so making those practical decisions, but also knowing that you're where in one hat, it's a little bit more, it's easier to almost take a shepherd's approach to your constituency, and to your followers, and to the people that you're serving. But as a politician, you have to make decisions that almost inevitably 50% of people are going to think that you did it because you want to see the world burn, or
Mhm.
because you're part of some movement or something like that. So how do you balance those two
Mhm.
hats, just from a perception standpoint,
Yeah.
the expectations of the people that you're serving?
Right. Well, I think there's a misunderstanding about people who say, religion and politics don't really mix. Well, religion helps shape politics. As always, religion has always played a role in the shaping of American society, from the foundations of the country. Although I don't didn't agree with some of those religious foundings, such as slavery, would basically sanctioned by
Mm-hmm.
biblical theological thought, which is inconsistent with it by my understanding of Scripture. Uh, but the bottom line for me is that uh, the Constitution is actually the highest law of the land,
Mm-hmm.
and it is the Constitution that ultimately was going to guide my decisions and my actions, and also the human dignity of people. If legislation does not respect and honor the human dignity of people, especially people who are marginalized, then I cannot be a part of that legislation. I will not support any legislation that undermines the human dignity of people. Uh, and from a religious perspective, is always, not just from a religious perspective, but from a political perspective. The question is about, does it promote the common good? So my actions promote the common good. Does legislation promote the common good? Does it, or is it legislation that really reflects the Constitution and guarantees and upholds the rights and liberties of individuals? That's how I approach that. Um, and again, it's sort of intertwined. I don't see so much separation as other people would see it, but rather I operate actually really from a moral center combined with the
Mm-hmm.
Constitution. Always, again, uh, my actions will reflect uh, obeying the highest law of the land, which is the Constitution.
How does your faith inform your politics?
Well, and I think my faith is central to informing my politics, because I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ, and by that I mean by I'm a firm believer in His mission. His mission was always to liberate the oppressed,
Mm-hmm.
to serve the poor, and to ensure that everybody was welcome within the household of faith, if you will. Everybody was welcomed by God, and that all people, again, should be treated with human dignity. And so, out of that, That's how it informs my faith. That's why I said earlier is, does it honor the human dignity of people? All people are made, and from my perspective, in the image of God, what we call in theological surgery the imago Dei, that we bear the image of God,
Mm.
and that every person should be treated uh, as such.
So you actually give me a perfect segue. In Louisiana and across much of the South, and quite frankly, I mean, you could say this about the country. A lot of people associate, and they instinctively associate public expressions of faith, and in particular Christianity and evangelicalism, with conservatism. But what you just said is sometimes what I mentioned, which is that there's nothing about the Jesus Christ in the Bible that I read that sounds anything like the modern conservative movement. Um, when you present a, and I don't know how you classify yourself, if you call yourself a progressive, a centrist, a moderate, whatever, but like when you present a left of center message, a democratic message as a man of faith, what do you think that people misunderstand the most in terms of the connection between your policies and your religion?
Mm. Yeah, well, I think it has to do with uh, people. Some people, a lot of people, especially kind of alluded to the conservative or evangelical Christians, having boxed God in.
Mm,
That God, that everything is fixed and is fixed in a certain way, and that the theological position that they espouse, uh, um, are actually positions that do not reflect the diversity within the Christian community. There's diverse bodies within the Christian community. There are different perspectives and different interpretations. Uh, but the bottom line is that any law, any piece of legislation, again, that dehumanizes people, that does not reflect the human dignity of people, is antithetical to what Jesus was about, and the way in which he lived in the world. Uh,
mm,
when you have people vilifying people, for instance, who are not straight, they're vilifying people who are members of the LGBT community. That runs antithetical to Jesus, who welcomed everybody, who said,
mm.
"Whosoever will, let her or him come, let them come." Uh, and to make arguments as if they were the whole truth and nothing but the truth does not reflect not only, I think, the Christian viewpoint, but it does not reflect other religions uh, who also have truths that we can learn from.
No, I think that's fair. Do you, how do you reconcile, and this is especially because you're running for federal office, this is always going to be something that you're asked, and you've been asked. I've heard it both at the DSCC meeting, I heard it at the forum. How do you reconcile your faith with your position on abortion?
Ah, well, it also comes down to uh, I am pro-choice, that a woman should have a choice, that we cannot dictate to a woman what she should do with her body.
Mm,
Uh, that's a matter between her husband, in the case they're married, and their her medical doctor. But it's also an issue about quality of life. So when it comes to bringing children into the world, you really have to answer issues of quality of life. What kind of quality of life can I give my child?
mhm,
Can we uh, provide an environment to bring our child into an environment where it's safe, where a child is going to be properly cared for, properly nurtured for, or is am I bringing this child into an environment where he or she is going to be ultimately um, starve to death, if you will, for lack of food? Or am I bringing a child into a world, into conditions uh, where he is going to be automatically put into a prison school to prison pipeline. So those are all those questions have to be taken into consideration. So for me, again, it boils down to woman's choice in consultation with her medical doctor and with her husband, significant other, or partner. Uh, I don't. I don't subscribe to the notion that abortion is a murder, as some people would say, because it's still the case is still out as to when does life actually begins.
Do you, how do you respond though to sort of, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm pro-choice for
Mhm.
sure. But how do you respond to criticisms that say life is so precious, no matter how bad the situation that somebody is born into, that it's better than making the decision for the infant ahead of time. That, just because the kid might be born into a dangerous neighborhood, bad schools, bad healthcare outcomes, that the kid should still be born anyways because that's the priority. That's the conservative argument in
Well,
response to that.
but I think that's being irresponsible as well. I think you're obligated to make responsible decisions as well. And knowing that you're bringing someone into conditions where the odds are against them or where they're likely to grow up in poverty, live in impoverished lives, or you could be setting them up not only for their lives to be um, for them not to experience the quality of life, but you could be setting them up where they can, very well destroy the lives of other people. I'm not saying that always is going to happen, but again, it's about it's making a responsible decision. Uh, and I just don't think children should be brought in into the world at all cost or at any cost. Uh, in fact, there is an argument, if you go back to the New Testament, where the person who wrote most of the New Testament, that we at least we ascribe to, who wrote most of the New Testament, Paul, at one time, he didn't even want people to get married because, his from his vantage point, the world was coming to an end. And why should people get married? Because if they get married, then they're going to bring children into the world. And so why should we bring children into the world so that they can suffer all of
Mm-hmm.
this evil
Yeah.
and hostility, death and murder, and so forth. Uh, so it's not totally foreign, in the Bible in terms of people making responsible decisions. Now,
Do you think?
saying that one is pro-choice does not mean that one is not pro-life or against
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that this issue? Do you think that too many Christians have kind of become single issue voters on the issue of abortion? And I guess more so, do you think that the Democratic Party would have more inroads if pro-life voters were, if we were able to reach out to pro-life voters more effectively?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. I think you would have definitely more inroads, and I think we don't do a good job of explaining that being um, pro-choice does not mean that you are not pro-life.
Hmm.
Again, we have to clarify that it's again responsibility. We have to be responsible with the decisions that we make. And again, decisions uh, have to take into account the quality of life. It's quality of life issues. It's sort of
Yeah.
like the end of life, where there are people in hospitals and so forth, and it has been determined by medical experts that this person uh, uh, quality of life will not have any kind of quality of life if he or she continues to be hooked up and breathing analysis and they're, practically brain dead and we're still hoping, for them to at least live longer or perhaps to be healed or recover and so forth.
Yeah.
That does indeed happen. But the fact of the matter is you have to think about the quality of life of a person. What kind of quality of life is this person going to have? We continue. when he or she is going to be a vegetable for the rest of his life. It just doesn't make any sense. Uh,
I kind of want to switch gears a little bit. I want to go back a little bit to uh, your religious hat, not necessarily your role in the church, but just as a member of the Black church. What would you how would you assess the current state of the Black church, particularly as it pertains to serving Black folks here in Louisiana right now?
that's a that's a good question, and I know I'll probably get uh, some criticism from my analysis.
Well, you're running for office, so
Yeah, right, right. Uh, but historically, I think I kind of alluded to this earlier that the Black church and Black preachers have always been in the forefront of the movement for justice, equality, and freedom, going all the way back to slave rebellion, starting with Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser,
mm-hmm.
and with Frederick Douglass, and we can go on all the way up until the early '90s with Henry McNeil Turner, uh, and then of course with Martin, with Martin Luther King, and even Adam Clayton Powell. In some sense, there have always
Mm-hmm.
been preachers and religious leaders in the Black prophetic tradition that have fought for freedom, justice, and equality. Something happened, however, in after the '60s and going into the '70s, where the Black church kind of lost its prophetic edge, its prophetic tradition. And then by the time you got to the '90s and 2000s, we were we had moved away from the prophetic tradition to prophets, you know. And I mean by that, uh, it wasn't about the prophetic tradition that is calling for justice and equality in society, but it was more about profiteering, you know, about making money, the health and wealth. And
Yeah.
so a lot of churches got caught up in that. Mostly, your mega churches, a lot of your mega churches did. And so we kind of lost that prophetic tradition. And so the criticism is on spot when it says that Black preachers and the Black churches are not doing enough, not involved enough in terms of the political process, or demanding more change within the social arena and the political arena. So I agree with that analysis that yeah, we need to do more. We need to become more actively involved, uh, rather than preaching about pie in the sky, or preaching
Yeah.
about otherworldlyism, when in fact we can have what we need in the here and now.
So I'm a preacher's kid, preacher's grandkid. My mom is a former AME pastor. My grandmother was a CME preacher, and one of the conversations, as somebody that's grown up in the church and seen it from all sides, but particularly from behind the scenes, um, one of the very sensitive conversations that doesn't happen enough in the Black church, and around the Black church, is whether in some cases we've lowered our expectations for leaders in the pulpit,
Mm,
um, not just morally, but intellectually,
mm,
meaning that sometimes we tolerate leaders who are charismatic, but
mm.
are not especially rigorous, informed, thoughtful, or accountable in how they teach and lead. I am sure that you've sometimes sat in some pews and heard sermons where you're like, I'm not sure what I just heard, everybody's like, preach, preacher, preach, preacher,
Right.
and I get it on one hand, but I'm wondering, one, do you think there's any truth to this idea that
Yeah.
maybe we've lowered our expectations for what we expect intellectually from our leaders,
Yeah.
but also, do you think that that's had any effect, especially because in the Black community we have a real long tradition of faith leaders becoming civic leaders, that's also then translated in us having lower expectations for our political leaders as well.
Yeah, I agree with your analysis. Um, when I left Louisiana, actually became a Christian right before my 18th birthday, 1 week actually before my 18th birthday. And I joined the church on the west side of Chicago. So I would always drive from the western suburbs into Chicago. There's a little small storefront church on the west side of Chicago off of Laramie Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And with the storefront preacher, I never forget him, one of the greatest men I've ever met in my life, by the name of Reverend Charlie Murray, who's actually from Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
and he had basically no formal education, probably high school at the most, um, but he was politically informed,
Mm-hmm.
and he was one of the leaders. He became the leader of the West Side Ministers Conference, and whenever he had the opportunity, he sought uh, to learn. You would have professors who would come in to the West Side Ministers Conference and teach Greek, for instance. The New Testament was written in Greek. You would have another one to come in and teach Hebrew. Old Testament was written in Hebrew originally. And so whenever he had the opportunity, he would try to learn and to improve his understanding of the biblical text
Mm-hmm.
and church history. And so then he became politically active. In fact, uh, he was one of the key persons who helped Harold Washington, the first black mayor of Chicago, to get elected. He was one of the key persons who supported Jesse Jackson when Jesse first ran back in 1984. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, there are persons who do not aspire, to improve themselves theologically or biblically. They think just reading the Bible, is it, and being able to quote the Bible and to memorize the Bible or to preach, without notes, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, is all that they need to do. Well, that was perhaps excusable years ago when we didn't really have access to seminaries or, full access to universities, or we simply could not afford to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh, that's inexcusable today. I don't think anyone who aspires to preach or to lead in pastoral ministry should go without some theological training uh, because you have a more informed public, you have a more informed constituency, and especially you have young people who are more educated, more well rounded. They have serious questions uh, that they need answered, and oftentimes uh, we don't answer them, or
Yeah.
we ignore dialogue and conversation. So that's needed just alone to be able to have these dialogue and conversations with young people, and uh, to be able to encourage them and in a different light and in a different way, but also to be able to take their points of view and not necessarily be offended by it or uh, to become dogmatic until where we have to persuade them um, that they must believe everything that's coming from our mouths without them being able to be critical uh, of what we say and what we do. So I'm for one, and by the way, uh, the majority of black ministers and black preachers do have some training. I think over
Oh, yeah.
67% is actually higher than white pastors who claim, someone who made the claim the other day about black preachers are totally illiterate and they don't do this and don't do it. Well, my education puts me among the top 5% in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, there are, the criticism is accurate, and I think it comes from people within our community that black preachers uh, can become better informed uh, in some areas, better theologically trained, and more open-minded in terms of having conversations and the heart conversation within the community and advocating for justice.
So talk to me a little bit about what because you talked about how you had considered running for this seat in 2024. And so you finally pulled the trigger this year. Um, from a very practical political perspective, what was the process that you went through in determining not only that you were going to run for Congress, but the path that you kind of outlined from you filing to May 16th. What's that path look like, and what was the calculus behind it?
Well, again, I it come to the place in my life where I felt that I'd done everything that I could do and given all that I could do in terms of working with organizations, among organizations, and even in terms of serving in churches as a local pastor. And from all of my experience, one thing that I've learned, uh, and especially from a faith perspective, is in our tradition, especially the Black tradition, as you well know, there's a saying that says prayer changes things.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that, but I have come to recognize and to realize that it's public policy
Mm-hmm.
that brings about the change we desire. And so it's this whole issue about public policy. And the best way I think that I can contribute uh, uh, the residents of the fifth district and to the country is to run for Congress and to be someone who's instrumental with voting on good policy, but also introducing good policy that's going to meet the needs of everyday, ordinary working people.
And I'm about to ask you about the policy itself, but I am curious what. I guess I'll ask you directly. Are you running to win? Do you expect to be the nominee?
Oh, I'm in it to win it. Yeah, that's yeah. Let me be more specific about what you just asked. First of all, I'm running because I believe I can win.
Okay.
Secondly, people deserve someone who's going to go to Washington and represent their interests, their best interests, and not using Washington as a cash cow.
Mm.
Then I'm running because I'm the type of person who's accessible, who's open and who's welcoming of people. I'm a people person. Obviously, it comes from my being, a pastor and just a community organizer. And I will always represent the best interests of the people. And then uh, when I'm not in Washington and D.C., you'll find me in the district,
Mhm.
listening to people, walking, talking with people, listening to their concerns, and finding ways that I can address their needs. So that's why I'm running.
What I'm trying to think of which one to ask first. Because I don't want one to sound like a setup if the answer to the next one is yeah, let me ask you, what have you heard as you've been traveling the district? And when did you announce? When
Oh,
did you
actually, I announced any before any of the candidates did.
okay.
I think I actually announced all the way back in October.
Okay, have you been campaigning since?
Uh, Not so much active, more so through social media.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, in the time since you know that you've been a candidate, what have you heard from just your conversations in the district that have helped sort of define what your platform is?
Well, for the most part, that people uh, want jobs with living wages.
Hmm.
That people really want to work. They want jobs, meaningful jobs, whereby they can, pay for the food on their table, pay their bills, and even you talk to younger people, they really want to stay in Louisiana, but a lot of them find that they don't have no options, but to leave and to go to Texas or to some other state to find job opportunities. Um, and people that I hear and I've been talking to, they want somebody who's really, really going to represent them, who's not going to sell out. I often hear people talking about how they sell out. They didn't really do anything for us. They went to Washington and just sided with, uh, in this case, sided with the president, sided with the Trump administration, and which basically works against uh, uh, the will of the people.
Do you how do you combat that perception? Because that's something that will eventually affect every incumbent. Is that
Mhm,
sometimes and that's the whole point of a representative democracy. You're taking
mhm.
votes on behalf of your constituents so that they don't have to pay attention to the budget, to
Right.
every resolution that comes before Congress, that you're voting on behalf of them using your judgment. But sometimes what that looks like is not always how people perceive it.
Mhm,
How do you balance that where your vote all the way in Washington D.C. is perceived one way by your constituents?
mhm,
Um, how do you publicly educate your constituents as you're representing
mhm,
their interests? What is
mhm,
your plan for that? Are you one of those that you're going to have a town hall every quarter? Are you sending out mail? Like, what is your? Because I
mhm,
do think sometimes the role of public communicator is sometimes
mhm.
de-emphasized when it comes to being a representative.
Right. Right. Clear, open channels of communication, regular communications with the people of the Fifth District. And that may be a combination of holding monthly town hall meetings where you give people actual updates in terms of what you're doing, what you are seeking to accomplish. Uh, and to be able to just, bring them up to date with what's going on,
Yep.
or you, you can actually ask people to give you a scorecard in terms of how you're doing. I want you to be, hold me responsible and accountable for the decisions that I'm making on your behalf. You've invested your vote in me, then I must be accountable to respond to you and tell you what I'm doing. And that's why it's important to be a part of the district and to live in the district. And I think I said that earlier. When I'm not in DC, I'm in the district and I'm telling people what's
Hmm.
going on. I'm listening to them tell me about their concerns. So I would definitely have regular communications with my constituents in person, not in person, and not just limited to a little burp via
Yep.
Facebook or social media.
How do you and the question I'm about to ask is about your platform, but I'm because I'm overly complicated, I'm going to complicate the question. Um, how do you want to be defined by the time May 16th comes around? If voters are just doing some basic word slash policy association, what do you want to what how do you want voters to define you? Or how are you going to define yourself as we get closer to May 16th?
Well, I want people to see me as someone again who they can trust and who's going to uh, deliver the services uh, and the needs of the people. That you can trust me to do that. That I am your representative. I'm not going to Congress to represent myself, but I'm going to represent the people of the Fifth District, and that they can count on me in terms of doing that.
What is the policy that you want to be like? What is the I guess I'm asking you what your platform is, but I don't want you to necessarily give me your stump speech. I guess what I'm asking is what are the policies that you are loudest about on the campaign trail?
Obviously, the healthcare,
Okay.
the healthcare issue here in the state of Louisiana is just horrific, especially in light of the Medicaid cuts, proposed
Hmm.
Medicaid cuts by the Trump administration, and how that's going to impact some 800,000, nearly a million people. Uh, and I was, for instance, as I said earlier, my opening statements, I was born in Monroe, which meant I had to travel 39 miles from Winsboro
Hmm.
to the hospital to be born. And with the cuts by the Trump administration, you will have people in this area, Northeast Louisiana, where there's 17 hospitals are projected to be closed, hospitals and clinics are projected to be closed. That means that all of these people over Northeast Louisiana, including the Franklin Medical Hospital that's now here in Winsboro, may be subjected to closing or having their services restricted and limited.
Yeah.
which also means that now you have people who have to get up and travel at 39 miles, perhaps, all the way to Monroe, if not to Monroe, another 120 miles over to Shreveport
Mm-hmm.
to get medical treatment and medical assistance. I think that's just absolutely horrible. It's absolutely, it's morally reprehensible that people have to travel so far or will have to travel so far just to get medical assistance and to have their medical needs addressed. So healthcare. The other issue that really uh, uh, I'm really concerned about is just the poverty.
Yeah.
That the poverty in this state, and especially in the northeastern part of the state of Louisiana, is just, again, it's just reprehensible. That this state has a 20%, nearly 20% poverty rate statewide. And then if you look in some of the northeast parishes in the northeast part of the state, like Madison Parish, for instance, 36% poverty rate. Over in East Carroll, 35% poverty rate, which a few years ago, Lake Providence was identified in East Carroll was identified as the
Mm-hmm.
poorest town in America, you know. And so the overwhelming poverty in this state, especially when a third, 25, third of children live in poverty in this state, 25% of children live in poverty in this state. Uh, no one should be living in poverty in America. No one should be living in poverty in Louisiana. And Louisiana is not an impoverished state. It has a lot of resources, natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that you've had bad public policy and you've had failed leadership.
Your district includes Rayville, which obviously right now is having a pretty important conversation about um, both the relationship between the state and the emerging AI industry, the environmental impacts of the data centers, um, and those two conversations, I think, kind of present a really interesting contrast in where the two parties are right now. Um, I'd be curious to know what your what your take on the Meta data center situation in Rayville right now, and more broadly, um, what would you prescribe in terms of a productive but not exploitative relationship between these broader industries that are promising to bring jobs and economic activity to the state, but especially because of our history with the petrochemical industry and those same promises and the
Mhm,
same,
mhm,
and the
mhm,
subsequent rubber stamping
mhm,
even without being able to make good on those
mhm.
promises. What would you say, what would you prescribe for the future of the relationship between the state and these larger industries that are coming to take advantage of some of these natural resources, but we're not always getting the good end of those deals?
Yeah, that's a good question. And as far as the data center in Rayville, it's sort of a mixed bag. Uh, you need good paying jobs, obviously, which will help jobs with living wages that will help lift people out of poverty. Um, at the same time, you do not need jobs coming in that's going to be just exploitative, exploit the community. Uh, I think I mentioned, just alluded to the fact is that, we're not an impoverished state. It's just
Mm-hmm.
bad policy. And so it's bad policy when you allow uh, corporations to come in and you give them all of these tax incentives, but then you don't, all these tax incentives, and then you don't allow them to pay any taxes, which basically rob people within the community of much needed resources that can be used um, to improve our public schools, our public education, that can pay teachers, and that that would generate more job growth and put more money in people's pocket. Uh, the project up in Rayville, in the Rayville area, started out to be what, $10 billion. Now I think it's up to $27 billion,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it's only going to create 500 permanent jobs. Uh, and some 2 to 3 to 4,000 construction jobs. All these jobs, the construction jobs, are obviously temporary, but 500 permanent jobs. I mean, that's good in one sense. But the problem I have with the AI data center is that, uh, and for other corporations that may come in Louisiana to do business, is that one of the things you have to establish community agreements in the negotiation stage, not after the fact. The thing that they've done is given these corporations tax incentives, but not involve the community in the decision making process. So the community must be at the decision making progress, but process where you have community agreements. That's, for instance, out of those 500 permanent jobs, that's going to go in as a result of AID data center. How many of those jobs are going to be for Louisiana?
Hmm.
How many of those jobs are going to be for people who live in the district? Or is it going to be like most of the corporate oil jobs, or all the good paying jobs of people who actually live outside of the state?
And they just bring them in.
Right, and they just bring them in,
Yeah.
and so that's what they're doing actually with the data center. And so that's what I mean about community agreements. I would be the kind of person to say, no, 80% of these jobs for something on that order must be within people who live within the community, live within the district. So you use the community agreements um, to secure jobs for people who live in the district, wherever that may be.
So let me ask you a few questions about Congress before we close out. First, have you thought about what committees you'd want to serve on if you get elected?
Yeah, I'd love to serve on the Judicial Committee,
Okay.
and that being because, again, as I mentioned to you earlier, I had a brother who served 40 years, over
Hmm.
40 something years in prison in Angola, a life without the possibility of parole. At the federal level, I want to lead the discussion about, on the death penalty, that not only the death penalty should be abolished, but both death penalties they should be abolished. So you have death by execution, but then you also have death by way of life without the possibility of parole.
Hmm.
Both are inhumane. Uh, and especially the latter, without life without the possibility of parole, it basically says to a person that you're not worth giving
Hmm.
a second chance, that
Hmm.
you are not redeemable, that you cannot be rehabilitated. That flies against everything that the prison system is supposed to be. It's supposed to be there to rehabilitate.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I would love to work on the judicial committee to set some standard at the federal level. Uh, the other would be probably the appropriations committee, because that's where the funding,
Oh yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
the funding lies. And I want to make sure that the people of Fifth District get every dollar
I think you'd
or
make quite a bit of
entitled
news
to.
if as a freshman you got appointed to the
Yeah, I
appropriations
know.
committee.
Yeah,
That'd
yeah,
be
yeah.
that.
Although it didn't take too long for Miss Letlow to get on there. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, if maybe we have a Democratic president and he
yeah,
identifies you as the next senator from
right.
Louisiana, then they're going to fast track you on there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, wh- what what policy, regardless of whether or not you've heard from constituents that they want it or not, what policy, if you got elected, would you be most excited about tackling? Like, is there a policy that's in your head that you're like, even if this isn't very popular, if I'm Congressman Foy, I'm going to introduce this bill?
And this is going to be controversial, and that is reparations.
Okay.
I will call for reparations, that African Americans are entitled to reparations. And people often think that reparation just has to do with giving people a paycheck. It's more than giving people a paycheck. It's really investing in communities. It's guaranteeing that this kind of stuff will never happen again. So you get guarantees and that the kind of harm that was done to us will never happen again. So I would introduce legislation on reparation. I think it's been it's sitting in the House for a long time. It's time that it get passed. And there's precedence for reparations. Germans paid the Jews for reparations. You go all the way back to Roman culture and early biblical history, biblical times. Always reparations always been paid to other groups. The Japanese
I
got
was just about to
reparations
say
from the internship. Yeah,
we have paid in,
right,
reparations before. Yeah.
right, right. And so I would definitely work on reparations legislation.
Realistically, do you think America will ever pass reparations legislation?
Wow. I'm an eternal optimist. So I'm, et- I'm an eternal optimist. Uh, I think that eventually they will or should. What hurts is when you have the elimination of programs like DEI, where it not only affects, employment, but even in education, and you're setting us back to go back to resegregating, public schools,
Hmm.
and people are resegregating within, their own communities, and so there's not dialogue or conversation uh, between people. It has to be more than just gathering together at a basketball game, at a football game where we all kumbaya, and then as soon as the basketball game, football game, or we go back to our own little enclaves and we don't talk to each other. Uh, so I hope that will happen. Perhaps when the generation that I'm a part of, the baby boomers have moved off the scene, then there's perhaps hope with the millennials and Gen Z and all those other folk.
We are currently we're currently at war with Iran. We've already invaded Venezuela. We are saber rattling relative to Cuba. For whatever reason, we have somehow become the bad guys in this reenactment of World War II. We've decided to take on the villain role. What is your assessment right now of American foreign policy? And yeah, particularly as it pertains to the war in Iran, uh, what do you think Congress's role should be moving forward?
I think it is abysmal. Obviously, the president has no regard, no respect for the Constitution. Clearly, only Congress can declare war, and this president has acted in violation of where he's abused his power, his presidential powers. He's overstepped his powers. That's only Congress can declare war. And if I'm elected, then I would do everything within my power to make sure that the president, or any president for that matter, does not overstep or hurt his boundaries or their powers. Um, and when I'm elected, I'm going to join the chorus of people to have this president impeached because he's clearly in violation of the Constitution. He has no regard for the Constitution, the highest law of the land. Uh, and he's also engaging uh, in violating international law. I don't think that it was within the prerogative of the president to go and to arrest and capture the Venezuelan president and bring him here. I don't think it's within his purview to go as he plans to next invade Cuba. Yeah, and I don't think that he should have invaded Iran because all of the evidence show that Iran did not have a nuclear weapon.
It does feel very, very, very familiar to when we invaded their neighbor. It You can't
Yeah.
make some of this stuff up. I am curious. Just a couple more sort of quick hit things. Do you believe in raising the minimum wage, and separately, do you believe in establishing a federal living wage, a dynamic living wage?
Yes, I do. I do. I think the federal minimum wage should be raised to at least a minimum of $15. Just I said minimum of $15 an hour. Yeah, I think that would certainly help the people here in Louisiana. And I think any new job created uh, should have living wages. You have to have living wages. It's just that simple. If we're going to lift people up out of poverty, and to ensure that people can, in fact, uh, pursue life, liberty, and happiness, that they have to have the resources to do so.
Um, do you? I'm trying to think of which one I want to ask. I guess yeah. In 2026, I always ask people this. How would you define the difference between a Democrat and a Republican?
Ah. uh, I think that the difference between the Democrat and Republican is that the Democrats uh, are a more inclusive body of people. It's a more inclusive group, and that we seek to welcome all in the tent, at least in theory. What happens is that when we have power, or when we are in power, we fail to act on that. We fail to stand on that in which we claim to be for or claim to do. That is, we simply don't follow through.
Mhm.
We sit around and we second guess, about whether we should implement this program or that program, and we just don't exercise the boldness and the courage to act. And the people put us into office to act, but we fail to do so. Whereas the Republicans uh, tell you what they're going to do, and then when they get elected, they do it.
Yeah.
And it's not always in the interest of the people. The Republicans, for instance, right now, everything they're doing is in Project 2025.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so that's the difference. Democrats need to grow some courage and grow some thick skin and act on what they say they're going to do. And I intend to do it.
I tell people all the time that when Republicans get elected, they could win by one vote and they will govern as if they just won by 40 points. And the one thing, I do agree with your sentiment, which is that they seem to understand that the most important aspect of having power is implementing policy. And even if the policy is unpopular on the front end, they seem to really understand the value of getting it done and then just
Yeah,
riding that wave until the effects come in. And for us, it does sometimes feel as if we almost don't think that we were supposed to get elected in the first place. And so then once we're there, we're trying just not to break anything because we're acting as
right,
if we're a guest in somebody else's house. And I do
right,
think that there is some real truth to us having greater conviction in what we believe we got elected for, as
yeah,
opposed to thinking that we just got elected because the Republicans screwed up. Maybe we got elected because people heard us
right,
saying that we believe in a living wage, heard us saying
right,
that we fight for workers, and so maybe we should go and do that.
right, right, exactly.
Before we close out, what do you want voters to know about you, particularly Democratic voters in the fifth, to know about you as we get closer to May 16th? And what distinguishes
Yeah.
you from the other people running?
Well, I want voters to know, first of all, that I am a person of profound faith, and that with my faith, um, I will honor and treat everyone with human dignity. Second, I'm a family man. I've been married for 50 years. 50 years. And I love my wife uh, today uh, just as much as I loved her when I said I do. And I have three wonderful children, grown adult children, and seven grandchildren. Uh, and it's about them, it's about their future, it's about your future, it's about families and their future. And so that's what I want them to know is that I care about people, and I want people to live in peace, harmony, and be safe and well.
Reverend Larry Foy, Democrat running for U.S. Representative in Louisiana's 5th Congressional District. Thank you, sir, for joining me tonight, and good luck on your journey.
Thank you.